In today's episode, we're going to build automated releases of a Compose multi-platform project that targets Android, iOS, Windows and macOS. The releases will be uploaded automatically to the releases section of the GitHub repository. We're going to cover Android, Windows and macOS in this episode, and next episode we'll look at iOS, including distributing it to TestFlight and distributing Android to Firebase. Welcome to Kotlin. This video is part of a series where we're building Minesweeper with Compose Multiplatform. Whilst it's designed to be useful on its own, there may be some references to earlier episodes. Right, so we're going to start by adding some secrets to the GitHub repository. To do that, we'll go to the repository page, click into settings. If we scroll down to secrets and variables and actions, and in here, this is where we'll add our secrets. So we want secrets, repository secrets, and add them at this level. So the first one we'll need is the alias for the key store. So this is for the Android releases. We're going to need the alias, the password, and the store password. So we'll call it Android key store alias. Now I've already created my key store. There should be plenty of examples online of how to do this. My alias is simply Kotlin. The next secret we'll need is Android key store password. Now I'm going to do this off screen, but I'm just going to add the key store password here. And the next secret we need is Android key store password. And lastly, we're going to actually use the secrets to hold our key store. To do this, we can just encode the key store file as base64. So if we see here, I have this is just an example.keystore. It's not the actual key store that I'll be using. But if we come to this folder in terminal, we can use cat to print the base64 encoded string, and then simply example.keystore and pipe it to the base64 command. Now we can copy this and then create a new secret, and we'll name this Android key store base64 and paste it into here. So now that we've added our secrets, we can go back to the project, and the next step, we need our GitHub Actions to be able to access the current version of the app. To do that, we'll create a file at the project level, it's just at the root, and we'll name this versions.properties. And within this, we're going to use semantic versioning. So for example, our app version may look like 1.5.13, and that's major, minor, patch. So we need a variable for each of these. We'll call it version major. That we'll just set to 1 for now. Version minor as 0, and version patch also as 0. Now for Android, it also takes a version code. We'll set that in here. This version code, and we'll start that as 1. Now we'll add a script that we can call in our GitHub action workflow to get the version number as a string. I will do that in a .github directory at the root level. Inside there we'll create scripts. From here we'll call it getVersionName.sh. Now this is going to be a bash script. So we'll declare that up here, bin/bash. Now we need to be able to access the variables that we've just created from this version.properties file. So to do that, this command is going to take in a parameter. We can just call source $1, and what we'll do is pass the path to this versions.properties file, and all that will allow us to do is within this script allow us to access, say, version major like this. So now we're able to just echo each of the parts of the version and concatenate them together. Now we can create the actual YAML file for the workflow. So to start, we'll create a workflows folder within .github. And here we'll just call it main.yml. The first thing we'll do is give it an appropriate name. So this is going to build and create the releases. Now we need to add when this is triggered, so we can use on for this. And we'll say on a push with tags, so any tag that follows this pattern. So what we're going to end up doing is tagging a commit with, say, v1.0.6, and now this workflow will know to be triggered. For this we'll also need to use workflow dispatch. Now we can create the actual jobs that will be run. So the first thing is going to create the actual release. So if we go back to the GitHub repository, this is what will create the release within this releases section here. So first of all, we need to give it a permission of write all, and we'll just run this with Ubuntu. And we'll add an output just named output 1. And we'll call it upload URL. So this will allow us to actually have the upload URL to know where to upload any artifacts. Now we'll add the actual steps. First of all, we'll give it a name. Let's just create release. Give it an ID too. So this is what's matching inside the steps. And the action that this is going to use, it's just named create release. Now it needs an environment variable. We need to get the GitHub token. So this is coming from the secrets, but this isn't something that we've created. So this is a special access token that's created automatically by GitHub, and it's used to authenticate on your behalf and anything to do with GitHub Actions. So you should have this automatically. Next we'll say with the tag name, and we can get this from github.ref. The release name, we'll call it release, and again get the tag. Now we'll declare that it's not a draft release, and also that it's not a pre-release. So now that we've created the release, we need to create each of the jobs for building Android, the Windows and the macOS application. Each of them have their own troubles and problems, so we'll do them one by one. The timestamp for each of these will be in the description if you only care about specific ones, but we'll start with Android. So we'll name this build Android, and again give it permissions of write all. And Android is fine to be run on Ubuntu. For macOS, we're going to need to use macOS, obviously. So it runs on Ubuntu latest, and it needs create release. So this is referencing this job here, and all that's doing is saying we need to wait for this to finish and then this can start. Now, one thing that's interesting is this build Android, our build macOS and build Windows will all run simultaneously. They'll just all need to wait for this to be complete. Next, we'll add the steps. So the first thing to do is check out the code. Use that with actions/checkout and get the repository. And get that from here. And the ref. Then on to the next step, which is to set up the JDK. So we'll give that a name. It should be here. Set up JDK. And this will use the action setup-java. And here we can declare a Java version. So if we look in one of our build.gradle files, you can see that we're using Java 11 currently. So we'll use that here. That should be Java version 11. Now the next thing we need to do to be able to execute with Gradle, where is it? This Gradle W, we need to give that executable permissions. So to do that, we can just run chmod executable and just a path to this. Next, we need to decode the key store. So that's what we saved in here. It was base64 encoded. Now we need to decode it. We're going to give this an ID. Now there's an action that we're just going to use for simplicity's sake. It's named base64 to file, and all it'll do is you pass it a file name and it creates it as a file. And this is named like so, base64-2-file, just version 1. Say width, give it a file name. We're just going to call this key store, and the string is in the secrets, and that was called Android key store base64. Now we can actually build the app bundle, so the .aab, and we'll also build an APK. So the first we'll do the AAB, and for this we can run, so using the Gradle wrapper, run compose app assemble release. Now we need to pass some parameters to this so it knows which key store to use to sign up with. To pass the parameters, you've got to use -P, and then with no space after it, you can pass the parameter name. And what we're going to pass is android.app injected.signing.store.file. So there's going to be 4 of these that we'll pass in. I'm just going to put these on new lines just for reference. Let's put them in strings just so we can see what we need. But we'll need store.file, store.password, key.alias, and then the password for the key, which is key.password. Now you might notice these match what we've created here, so we're just going to pass the secrets in to these 4 parameters. So we'll start with the file. Well, the file's a little bit different, so equals, we're going to use what was output from here. So we can say steps.decode key store dot outputs dot file path. And if you look at the GitHub repository for what it's doing here, you'll find where you can get this file path from. You'll be able to see what it's doing, but this should just work if you follow these steps. So we've got this first parameter sorted, and we need the next one, so we'll do it in exactly the same way, but we'll copy this string now. So dash capital P and then this string, and this will equal secrets dot android key store password. We'll take the next one, which is the alias, dash capital P and this one is android underscore key store underscore alias, and lastly the password and that should be everything we need. Now we can do exactly the same to get the APK, so we'll just copy this and rename it to build Android APK, but instead of using assemble release we'll use bundle release. And the last thing we need to do for Android is actually upload this AAB and APK to the release that we've created up here. So we'll start with the AAB, we'll give it a name, just upload release AAB asset, and this will use actions / upload release asset. It's version 1. Now we need the GitHub token similarly to up here, so I'm just going to copy this. We have it there. We'll say with upload URL. Now if you remember, we provided the upload URL here in the outputs. So we get that, say needs dot create release dot outputs dot output 1. We need needs at the front here because it's depending on that job from up here. Next we'll give it the path to the asset to be uploaded, so the AAB in this case. Now the path that it's going to be built to will be in compose app, builds, outputs, and we haven't built it, but it should be in bundle and release, and then we'll find it there. So we'll just add that here. and it will be named compose app-release by default. So next we'll give it a name. So we'll just name it Minesweeper K, and we'll use the tag name just so it has a version. So we can use ref_name here and .aab. And we have to give a content type, and for a .aab this is just going to be application/x authorware-bin. So it's just a binary. Now the upload for the APK is quite similar, so we're just going to copy this and we'll rename it upload release APK. Now there's a couple of changes. So the upload URL will stay the same, this will stay the same, the asset path will change. So the outputs for APKs are going to be in compose app build outputs/apk/release, and then in here we'll have compose app-release, and this will be .apk. Now we change the asset name to end in .apk, and the content type is slightly different too. There's one for Android packages, and that's vnd.android.package-archive, and that should be everything we need to build the Android apps, well, the AAB and APK, and upload it to the release. There is actually one last thing we need to change. The version code and version name currently are just hard-coded as 1 within the build.gradle file for our compose app module. So we need a way to get the versions from our versions.properties. So we can do that by, we'll do it up here. We need to get an input stream of the file. So we'll just name this version properties input stream. We can get that as a file input stream. Now this is in the root directory, and it's named versions.properties. Next we'll load the properties through the input stream. We can just say properties as the java.util, and then for this properties instance we can call load and pass in the input stream. Next we'll get each of these properties from this instance of properties. So we want the version code, and this just matches the name here, and we'll say .toInt. Now I'm just going to duplicate this 4 times and change this to major, and we want minor and patch, making sure that each of these are matching what we're declaring here. Next we need to create the version name. To do that we're just going to concatenate each of these properties. Just going to call it version name property. And just concatenate this with a dot in between each. And now all we need to do is scroll down to where we're declaring the version code and version name here, and now we can just use version code property and version name property, which should be this string. So now we'll create the job for the step for building the Windows application. So we're just going to copy a good chunk of what we've written for Android So just down to here, because we need all of this. This is at this level. Now this will change to build Windows. Now this will obviously need to run on Windows rather than Ubuntu. And everything else should be fine. So now we'll just create the step to build the .msi. We'll name this build.msi. And for that we can run the Gradle command compose app package release msi. And all we need to do is upload the release asset. So similarly, well, I'll tell you what, we'll just copy this here because we're going to need to use all of the same stuff. So we'll name this to MSI asset. Now the upload URL is going to be the same. The asset path is going to be quite a bit different. So this is going to be also inside compose app in the build folder, be /compose/binaries /main release /msi / now this is going to take the name of the application. We haven't set this yet, but we'll add it to the build.gradle file soon. We'll name it Minesweeper K in our case dash. Now we need to get the version from somewhere. We can't really take the tag name because that's going to have a letter V on the front. So what we'll do is create a step right before this, and this is just going to use this script that we created earlier. So we'll call this get version name, give it an ID so we can reference it. Now we'll pass which shell we want to use. It's bash in our case. We can run echo version name is equal to, now we'll access the script. So ./github/script/get version name.sh. Now if you remember, we're passing in the path to the versions.properties file, and this is just at root level, so we'll just say versions.properties, and we're going to put this into the GitHub output. Now the asset name, we're going to call it Minesweeper K dash, we'll get the tag name, but this will be .msi, and for that, for the content type, we'll use octet-stream. So I'm going to show how we're building macOS before we do anything with the build.gradle file, because it's very similar to what we've just done for Windows. So much so that we're just going to copy this whole thing, we'll paste it in. Now we'll call this build-macOS, and this needs to run on macOS. We just need to change that, and then the only things we need to change, this isn't building an MSI file anymore, this is now DMG, and the command for that is package release DMG. We still need to get the version name. We'll rename this to DMG. Now the asset path, oh, we didn't finish this for Windows, I'll do that now. So all we need to do is we can use steps.get version name, which is coming from here, dot outputs, and we'll get the version name that's declared here. Then this will be .msi. So if we go back to macOS, there is one change we need to make. So this is in main release, but b/dmg. Then in here, we'll just get the version name in a similar way. And this will of course be .dmg. And then we need to update this to be .dmg, and the content type is the same. So now finally we'll come back to the build.gradle file and scroll down to the compose.desktop block, and this is okay. Now this is something that we need to change inside this native distributions. So the package name is fine. The package version, we can use the version name property that we created earlier. The target formats, we just include all three. Now some other properties that we can add a description. I'll just name this Minesweeper K by Kotlin. You can add a copyright section, so you just want any sort of copyright message. I don't know how to do a copyright symbol, but you know, could write something like this. We can link to a license file, so this is something that will show up as you use the installer. So this is something we will set, and from this we can just say project.file, and we need to go up a level, and we actually have our license file from the GitHub repository. You probably don't have one, but feel free to create, just if you're curious. This is what's been there. Now we'll add some build types. Well, we'll need to add the release build type. Let's say build types.release, and within here we'll use ProGuard to minify it. So we want obfuscate set to true, and we need a link to the ProGuard file. Now I've just added this. I can't remember where I found a lot of what we need for the ProGuard rules. It's just a collation of all the different libraries we're using, but importantly we need this. Just make sure to change the package name to match, you know, your project. So from here we'll link to that. Yeah, it should be said that if you just look in the GitHub repository linked in the description, you'll be able to find this. And this is looking at a point of already being in the Compose app module, so we can just directly access this as proguard-rules.pro. And lastly, we'll just add some settings for specifically the macOS version. So we can do that within native distributions using the macOS function. So this will take a block, and in here we're just going to set a doc name. So just the name of how it will show in the doc, and we need to add an entitlements file. So here we'll just set it to project.file default.entitlements. Now what's inside here will probably differ on your project. I'll just create the file to start with. And this is what I've found I need for my project. Just Google these strings if you want to read what they do. So I've created a commit with all the changes we've just made, and I've tagged this as v1.0.0, which matches what we've got in the code. So now I'm just going to push this, and now if we go back to our GitHub repository and go into Actions Okay, it wasn't showing up. I think just with having to, like, the commit included the workflow here, just tagging before I pushed didn't seem to trigger it. So all I did was I just deleted the tag from remote, re-tagged it and pushed it back to main, and that's triggered. So now if we click in, we can see that it's created the release. So we'll have a look at that first. So now we can see here release version 1.0.0 has been created. It doesn't have anything at the moment, but that's because it's all being built. So if we go back into Actions, we can look at each of our 3 jobs. So these are all being run simultaneously. We've got Android, Windows and macOS. This is probably going to take a little while, so I'll just skip ahead until something's happened with them. So the first problem we've came across is the version of the Android Gradle plugin that we use and requires Java 17. So that should be a fairly simple change. Now, where it's using version 11, this is referenced a lot throughout the project. So we're just going to use find and replace for this. So on macOS that was Command Shift R, and we're going to replace everywhere we have Java version 11 to be 17. So we'll just replace all of those, and we also need to change it here for the JVM target. So again, Command Shift R, we'll copy that into here and change that to be JVM underscore 17. Now what we'll do, since we've made a change, is in the version.properties we'll just update the version patch and we'll update the version code. We'll automate this later in the episode, but now that that's changed, we'll just go into the source tree or whichever however you use Git and commit all of these. We don't want this preferences underscore pb file. We can commit this and we'll add a tag of v1.0.1. We'll push the tag and as you can see it's started the new action, so we'll wait for this. And this is the joy of continuous integration and deployment. We've forgot to change it inside the main.yml where we're declaring the Java version. So again, we're just going to use find and replace because we're using this in 3 places, and change this to Java version 17. So that's there. Let's set up this JDK and here. And we'll do exactly what we did before, just update the version, add a tag. And as you can see, Windows has failed again, and that's because this package name isn't aligning with this. So the package name will get placed here. So for the desktop applications, we're just going to set the package name to just be this, Minesweeper. We don't need the package. We'll go back and set that there. And one last thing we've had to add, we need to run chmod and give executable permissions to this bash file. And going back to the GitHub repository, we can see that all 3 have succeeded. So if we go into the releases, we can see all the files here. So because I'm on macOS, I'm going to download the .dmg. And now that that's downloaded, I can run this. And as you can see, we now have an installer. So we'll drag that into applications. And now I'm able to run it directly from applications. We click open. And there we go. And clicking into about, we can see the name, the version, and the copyright message that I've placed. At the start of building your CI or CD pipeline, it's quite common to have a lot of failed workflow runs just while you're trying to figure out how it works. That's okay, you can just leave them there as a badge of honor, because you know that any commit after this, it's going to succeed unless something's really gone wrong. On the next episode, we're going to lock down the main branch so that you can't just push directly to it. We're going to force pull requests from other branches into the main branch. We're going to allow releases to be created manually through GitHub Actions, allowing you to choose whether to increment the major, minor or patch version. So this will increment everything within versions.properties that's needed and automatically commit that for you, and then it'll build the release and push it out. We'll look at automatically uploading the builds to Firebase for Android, and we'll also take a look at iOS, set that up in the pipeline and have it released to test flight. If you've made it this far, I just want to say thanks for watching, and make sure to star the repository and subscribe if you want to see future episodes.